Well, welcome. I would like to share some of my experience on the path of manhood and my journey um, as a man. But before I talk about the particular aspects that I would like to focus on, let me address something that I have alluded to in prior sessions. I believe strongly that the path of a man and the pathway that most men must walk is one that will be challenging, that will be difficult, but one we must embrace whilst remaining stoic, and one we must and we are obligated to embrace without resentment, without ascribing ourselves the benefit of a victim or the status that the universe or life is against us. Our path is a very different walk. As a man, you will come, and I share this with humility, recognizing that I am still a young man, and there is still so much more to learn, to observe, and to experience. But let me share something that I think may be useful to you as a man. At several stages of your life, you will be tested and you will be tempted. The temptation will not be temptation for faith or the temptation for fame or fortune. It won't be the temptation of your loins. It will be temptation and a test of your manhood. How you respond will form and define at least a decade or two of your life. For some men, it will form the entire frame of your future. At several stages, I should say, of my journey as a man, I have found myself seeking better pastures. And I have journeyed away from loved ones, away from friends and family, traveled thousands of miles to look for a better life, to seek better opportunities. On one occasion, particularly, I remember this very vividly. It was an evening. The 2 years or 3 years prior, I had labored. I had worked very hard. I was pushing 16, 17 hours every day, if you included travel. I was working very hard. I was overwhelmed with the burdens that come with your financial obligations. All I did was work. Before then, study, work, and then work. On this particular evening, I remember very clearly, I was overwhelmed with the spirit of, should I use the word victimhood? I was overwhelmed with a spirit and feeling, an aura, aroma. The fragrance in the air was one of, woe am I. I called my father. One of the best calls I ever made. I called my father and I couldn't say a word. Now he knew Fathers always know. He knew from my countenance over the phone that something was wrong and that perhaps I was struggling. All I wanted to do was hear the sound of my father's voice. I remember two distinct sentences. I won't bore you with what was said in the entirety of the conversation, but two I think will help you. The first was, he said, "I am very proud of you, son." Now, for most men in my experience have never heard such words from a man that they love or care about. That has been my experience. Now, some men have heard, "I love you," but very few men have heard the words, "I am proud of you." Very powerful words. I encourage a lot of my female friends not to say "I love you" always to their partners and husbands and loved ones, but to say instead, when sincere, "I am proud of you." The words "I am proud of you" far supersedes in a man's psyche than the words "I love you." "I love you" means nothing to most men. It doesn't mean we don't understand love. But because we are bound to our duty as men, in other words, nailed to the cross of our responsibilities, we don't want you to love us. We want you to be proud of us. My father said those words. Now, he said something else. He said, "Son, why don't you come home?" Now, I was thousands of miles away from my family, my loved ones, my friends, my community, my upbringing, and everything that felt safe as part of my upbringing. "Why don't you come home, son?" That was my garden of Gethsemane at that particular instance in my life. In other words, I was no different to the one in the story who was about to say, "Father, please take this cup away from me." As a man, you will go through your garden of Gethsemane. You will come to the crossroads. Sometimes you may not hear the words, "I am proud of you." Sometimes all you will hear, which is what most men hear, is a calling back to safety. My father said those words because he loved me. He could see, and this is the instinct in a father, to protect. He couldn't bear the pain of knowing that his son was suffering and away from him, because all he wanted to do was to take the pain and to carry the burden on my behalf. It was my cross. I had to take that cross off my hill and nail myself and complete my journey. Here is the point of that conversation. I needed encouragement. I received it. I received it in the right way, in the words of my father, being reaffirmed into my psyche that he is proud of me. Number two, I needed the temptation. That was the crossroads of manhood. The temptation that calls you, the voice that beckons you not to take the path that is narrow, rather to take the path that is wide. When you hear that call, if you are a man, charge on, charge forward, march forward. Even if you feel that the ammunition you have for the adversaries and the battle ahead is not enough, do not nurse your pain. Do not turn back. Do not look back. Burn your boats. I had burned my boats. I couldn't go back. As far as I was concerned, I was going to die on that hill, and people would have seen one of two things. They would have seen me at the top, or they would have seen parts of my corpse falling all the way down. I had burned my boats. Many men suffer from depression, mental health challenges, struggle in life because they haven't burned their boats. Many of you are not willing to do whatever it takes. Many of you are not willing to pay the price no matter the cost. Many of you are looking for the nursing hand of father and mother. And many of you will hear the voice in the wilderness that calls you and says, you don't have to do this like this. You don't have to go further. You can always come back to safety. Come back to your family. Come back to your community. Come back to where it feels safe. If you listen to that voice, that will define you. In other words, at the most important times in a man's life, you will be tested. Now, yours doesn't have to be 40 days and 40 nights following fasting. It could simply be on your road to Damascus. You hear the voice, you hear the calling. And the question is always, how do you respond either to the call to greatness or the call back to a mediocre life? And let me share something else that I should say. The conversation I had with my father was an eye-opener. It was an eye-opener because what he stimulated in my heart with two things. It reminded me that my path towards being a man was not hidden in my father's experiences in life, that I had to forge something for myself, but one that would have ensured that my father continued to be proud of me. That was the first. The second thing it did for me is it reminded me that the past was not where the answers to my future would reside. You see, the past is like a spent check. Once you've cashed the check, you can't spend the check anymore. The future still to come is a promissory note. It's possible. The present is all you have. When your moment comes, and as you hear yourself say, get behind me, ideas and thoughts and distractions, get behind me. Or as you hear yourself beg and cry, please take this cup away from me. The pressure is too much for my shoulders. No matter how hard the journey may be at that time, that present time, which is all you have, be comforted by the reality that there have been other men who journeyed the same pathway and found it easier. There were some who journeyed the same pathway and found it harder. Those who found it easier did something different to you. Those who found it just as hard or harder than you, perhaps that was their faith. But ask yourself the following questions, which I had to do. Who am I around? How are they influencing me? How are they inspiring me? And who do I need to be around? How will they influence me? And how will they inspire me? Shortly after, I remember walking back into my room and I made a number of decisions. And here is why I bring today's conversation to a close. I made a few decisions. It occurred to me that I was raised not to burden other people with my life struggles. And here I was in no friends, generally speaking, in a foreign land with so much burdens, but making a decision not to burden other people with my struggles because people have their own issues. I found that I started to look within myself, almost in a narcissistic way, looking to myself as though I'm a victim, as though my cards are poor cards, looking to myself for pity. That was a mistake. I went back to my room and I very quickly asked myself a few questions. In order to achieve my goals, how could I be of value or service to other people? And how can I help other people achieve their goals in such a way that they could achieve my goals with me as a byproduct of the value I bring to them? In any case, I made a few decisions. Firstly, was I had to get out of my head. And I did so by deciding to read. I picked up a book, and lo and behold, there were answers. So as men, let me give you one secret. All you seek is captured in words and is captured in other people's experiences. The question is, do you have the desire to look around your environment to find your answers? Number 2, go out and make friends. I immediately joined the gym. Yes, I was doing 17 hours, sometimes 18 hours every day, sleeping very, very little, sometimes 4 hours, sometimes less. I decided I needed to take care of my health. I needed to go out. So at the weekends, I made it almost mandatory that I would go to the gym and I would exercise and I would interact with people and I would make friends. A few friendships blossomed from that experience. But each of those friendships developed because I reached out to other people. The point being, get out of your head, seek for help through study, and go help other people. Interact with people and see how you can help. That chapter of my life ended well. It ended well because I took some steps. Some of the steps I took were quite easy. Most people can and should do the same thing. Now, in conclusion, the point I was hoping to get across, I apologize if I did so poorly, but the point I was trying to get across is as follows. Your journey to manhood and your journey through manhood will come with points, moments when you are tempted. It will be a calling to something that could hinder you or lift you up. When you find that the voice in the wilderness, the voice in your head, is one that is looking at self in a selfish way, or one that is taking on the aroma of being a victim, please, whatever you do, shake that off your system, off your body, off your psyche, and look for a way to connect with people and to learn. Do not, whatever the reason, do not Do not deny that part of you that is calling you to greatness. Too often, many people deny that part of them that is calling them towards greatness. We turn down the volume because the pressure is too much. The pain is too much. When we reflect, we feel it's been too much of a burden. So we deny that calling. My recommendation to you is, do not give your power, which is something you have, to things that will limit you. Whether those things are physical, spiritual, mental, or psychological. You will find, as we move into the next decade, more men will suffer from depression. You will see more fatal suicidal attempts and successes as part of that pursuit. You will find a lot of mental health issues with men, and all of that can be avoided. Get around the right people. Get a coach, get a mentor, make friends. Work hard. Introspect less. The obsession with self can be your downfall. Look to other people. Look to provide value when you can. And if you think for some reason you need professional help, try to find people who can help you heal holistically rather than through medication. I have a lot of reservations about medicating people. It's just my perspective, my opinion. And instead, go through a process of self-healing, but also identifying what sins of your father and your forefathers you are carrying and what price you must pay. Unfortunately, you've heard me say this before, and I believe it to be exceptionally without error, that the sins of the father will live until the second, the third, the fourth, sometimes the fifth generation, except there is a disconnect, or except that price is paid or atoned for. Many men these days are struggling not because you've done something wrong yourself. No, you're simply paying for the sins of those that came before you. And this is why I take the time to explain the concept of the human self. We are spiritual beings. The transfer of sins occurs in the spirit. We live in a physical body. Your physical body can be renewed, it can rest, it can recover, but you only get one. And we are gifted with an intellect, a mind, and through that intellect we can create our emotional state. We can create the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of hell, depending on how we choose to lead our life and live our life. Choose the right path. But remember this: you are a man. Your pathway will be tough. The journey and the toughness of your path is what creates the resilience you need for success. You can't make lemonade without lemons. And you can't be a man without some knocks and traumatic experiences. But reframe and rephrase your experiences. Rather than choose conventional names that are being given to us in modern society today, depression, mental health, toxic masculinity, and all the nonsense, stay true to your purpose. Just simply say, these are distractions. And remember this: if you can rephrase and reframe your experiences such that you say, the events of my life have not come to kill me, and that what does not kill me will certainly make me stronger. Now, I wish you all the success that you can master.